90% of the people either rejected us or ghosted us. We have a very clear path to getting to 1 million, 2 million in revenue. I want you to get to 100 million or 1 billion in revenue. Right now, the most effective channels are by far YouTube and LinkedIn. I missed WhatsApp. I was like, I have regret. I did Kosei, and I still have a bit of regret. I had this dream. I've been at Stanford. I have all these friends who have done amazing things. I want part of that.
Thank you so much for the time to join me today, Rahul. I'm curious, to start off your sort of tech story and your journey into like CS and engineering, you started out at Stanford, but I remember you on a video mentioning CalTech was actually your dream school.
Yeah.
Could you talk me into like that early college decision time?
Yeah, I mean, the reason CalTech was my dream school is my brother, who's 2 years older than me, he was at CalTech. And he would tell me stories that, we were both the nerds in high school, like probably many of the people listening. And, it's just like CalTech was the place for nerds. Like, if you were really, really deep into math or physics or any kind of science, like CalTech was the place. And I just felt like a combination of that aura around CalTech, along with my brother being there, and he could be there to help. That was why CalTech was the dream. But then, interestingly, I went to CalTech and Stanford for their like respective kind of what are they called? Like admission days of like people who got in. You can check out the school, and I felt I don't know how to describe it, but I felt like the vibe was better at Stanford. I kind of went there like, oh my gosh, there's like people here who are just doing so many more exciting things, frankly. And it was a really difficult decision, but I did end up going to Stanford over CalTech.
Yeah, for sure. And I also know you mentioned before something about the sort of exploration that was enabled at Stanford. Because if I'm not mistaken, you were actually interested in math and physics at first, right? Could
Yeah.
you talk me through like how you sort of transitioned into more like a traditional software engineering type?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it is so much, and I tell people this all the time. You are a product of the people around you, the environment around you. And that is exactly what happened to me. Like if I went to CalTech, who knows what I would be doing now. But I do think that my decision to kind of really go deep into computer science and software engineering and just basically abandon, for all intents and purposes, like physics and math, came from just the fact that Stanford, middle Silicon Valley, I had friends who were literally doing startups and venture-backed businesses, or just making like an iPhone app. That was the heyday of the iPhone and App Store. They're making thousands of dollars, and that was magical. Like the fact that you guys do that, and there were people around who I knew who were doing that. That was pretty addictive and interesting. And so I think, after about a year, I kind of very quickly made up my mind that, okay, the better thing to do, the more opportunistic thing, the more exciting thing is going to just be doing software engineering.
Yeah, for sure. I guess definitely, I guess with the pressure of Stanford, or just the environment, it definitely points you towards that direction.
Yeah.
So definitely, obviously going through different internships throughout your time in Stanford. And I'm wondering, this is a quick aside, but there's a story that you mentioned about getting an offer from both WhatsApp and Facebook and sort of a bit of regret. Could you possibly tell that story?
Yeah. It's pretty interesting because like you look back at it and you see like, wow, I didn't understand the magnitude of the people I was dealing with at the time. And then you look back and like, wow, things are kind of crazy. But basically what happened is in 2013, I ended up interning at Facebook, but I actually had two offers. Facebook acquired WhatsApp in 2014. So this is, before all that. And so I had an offer from Facebook and I had an offer from WhatsApp. And WhatsApp, for those of you, I mean, probably people don't remember, but like in 2013, 2013, it was still fairly small. And it's kind of like, okay, just messaging app. I had some family who I vaguely remember using in India, but I still didn't really know what it was. Like people in the Bay Area didn't use it at all or very early. And so I remember I got the offer. People seemed smart. People at Facebook also seemed smart though. And Facebook was a much, much bigger brand name. It meant something that you were at Facebook and you had the free food, Mark Zuckerberg, like you could interact with him. It was so cool. And so I was like kind of split of like, where should I go? And then actually one of the founders of WhatsApp, Yan Kung, the recruiter said, hey, we like you and we'd love you to just come by and Yan is going to take you out for dinner in Mountain View. Like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. I don't know who this guy is. I show up. We went to this Indian restaurant on Castro Street and we talked a lot. And we talked about at the time about how I could help build out WhatsApp on web. At that time, there was no web version of WhatsApp. And we're like, oh, that's super cool. And then so this nice guy came back. I was like, hey, well, that was interesting, but I still think I'm going to go with Facebook. I was like, and I went to Facebook. Yeah, honestly, it was a good time. Like no regrets. But then shortly after that internship ended, Facebook acquired WhatsApp for the largest acquisition at the time in history, $19 billion. And it's kind of like, Yan Poon, that guy became a multi-billionaire overnight. And, I feel like if I had actually gone to WhatsApp and gotten equity, if I had gotten a return offer, that equity would have also been worth millions of dollars for me immediately after graduating. And so, it was just one of those things where like, especially if you go to a place like Stanford or if you're around high powered people, you can always live in regret that things could have gone so much better. But, you can't really change the past. And all you do is you learn from it and you kind of update your priors going forward and figure out how to, keep learning.
No, that's a crazy story. Definitely like no way to be able to predict that in the moment. But looking back, it's like, damn, I guess like as you mentioned, like just being in this sort of environment, you get to live with regrets. I'm wondering, curious, like after Stanford, your first full-time job was founding engineer at Kosei, right? Like and I was at the time, it's like obviously a much smaller scale than Meta. Did that sort of experience influence that? Like you wanted to have a more potential like for a huge outcome versus like a normal outcome? Like walk me through that.
Yeah, 100%. So, okay, my mentality, I was at Stanford for 5 years. So at that point, I had done 4 different internships at a bunch of different companies. I felt like I went to Stanford. I have the name brand. I have Meta. Um, and also this story I just told about WhatsApp was very much on my mind. I literally missed out. I could have been friend of the billionaire. I could have been a millionaire, right? All these things that were happening. And so when the professor of mine in my co-term, my 5th year at Stanford, said, "Hey, he's starting a company and he thinks I could be a good fit," that was very compelling to me, right? And so I ended up actually turning down an offer from Google and I joined this company called Kosei. And I think largely it was this FOMO of, hey, what if this turns out to be the next WhatsApp? I don't want to miss that boat or that train one more time. And the other thing, to be totally honest with you, is there was some element of ego. It is like, hey, I already have the big tech name brand. I don't want to be one of 1,000 engineers who are joining Facebook or Google or Microsoft. I want to be unique. I want to be a special snowflake. And doing a startup can offer you that in a way that, being one of 100,000 people at Google could not. And so I think that's not the right reason to, pick a company, obviously. But it still worked out. I think Kosei was a lot of ups and downs. We can talk about that if you're interested. But after a few months, it very quickly got acquired by Pinterest.
Yeah, I'm sort of curious about that sort of velocity. Like within like a year, like obviously being acquired by Pinterest, which is obviously a big company, like what sort of like experience did you have like influencing maybe even your entrepreneurship endeavors today? Like
Yeah,
was this sort of like a thrill rush?
it was. I mean, so I think that it sounds good on paper. And like, the narrative I present typically is that it was a huge outcome. It was really great. There was a TechCrunch article. I was in TechCrunch. It's like a big deal for me and my family and things like that. But when you look behind the covers a little bit, it was actually not that great because here's my like the way I thought about it in the moment is I joined as a founding engineer. There was a team of like 4 people. So it was like the professor of mine who was very clearly more senior to me, smarter than me, more experienced. And there was another guy he worked with who was like 50. So there's a very clear like dynamic age gap and expertise gap between me and the 22-year-old and these founders. And so I felt very much a lack of control. Like I came in and then one day they said, "Hey, guess what? We're going through this acquisition process. I can't say much, but we'll figure out what happens in a few weeks." And then I came in a couple of weeks later and, "Hey, we're getting acquired by Pinterest." And then you have to interview because it wasn't, Kosei was acquired as an acqui-hire, which meant that we didn't have a product, right? We only were around for like 6 months. Like we had no product. We didn't even have that much IP, frankly. We had some IP, some application, but Pinterest was largely acquiring us for the talent. And what that meant is they wanted good talent, right? So obviously the professor of mine was kind of world famous or in that field, pretty well known. So he came on. And then for the 3 or 4 engineers that we had, all of us had like a weekend of notice and say, on Monday, you're going to go in and do 6 interviews at Pinterest. And that was tough because like I was not ready for interviews. And I remember I was borderline. Like I did the interviews. They called me back for a second day of interviews saying, "Hey, we still are not entirely sure if we want to give you an offer or not. Can you come back?" And like I was very panicked because imagine how that would be where like I worked at Kosei and then a TechCrunch article comes out saying Kosei was acquired by Pinterest. Everyone starts congratulating me like, "Oh, good job. Like you're part of this big success story." And I'm like, "No, I got nothing out of it. I even lost my job." Right. And so I was like so nervous and I did barely, I made it. So it ended okay. But I felt like overall it was actually more negative than positive, if I had to say honestly, like the whole experience where I signed up to do this 2 or 3 year commitment of a startup. 6 months later, it prematurely ended very stressfully. I didn't even have any control in it. And so that was tough. But, I think, again, it was a good learning.
No, definitely. I appreciate you sharing. Like, yeah, but even though on paper, like you mentioned, it seems like obviously a great get acquired, but behind the scenes, I didn't even know you had to interview again, just being so cutthroat. That's crazy. And I'm also curious, I guess, obviously, after that, working at Pinterest and then you transition working at Meta, it seems like your life is almost like, seems the trajectory is like, the cushy, like, just gonna promote every couple of years, eventually just ride off to the sunset. But obviously, after around 4.5 years at Meta, you chose to leave. And obviously you made a video about this, but could you possibly like elaborate again, sort of the mentality and why you chose to leave what seems like, the 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 way to go?
Yeah, I think so. There's a couple reasons it boils down to. Um, One is like again, this is like my third attempt now, right? I missed WhatsApp. I was like, I have regret. That I did Kosei, and I still have a bit of regret about that because like it ended prematurely. I was not in the driver's seat. I thought I really want to do this before I'm too late in my career. I really, really will have regret if I don't do it. So one element was like, I've had this dream. I've been at Stanford. I have all these friends who have done amazing things. I want part of that. So the regret minimization was one part. The other part practically was I finally had enough money. Like, overall, like, there were ups and downs. I got a lot of failure. I got rejection from promotion. I didn't get a lot of jobs that I wanted to get. But overall, things were going well. And I had saved up enough money where, hey, I could not work for 2 or 3 years and I would be comfortable, even in Silicon Valley. So that was another part of it. And the third part of it was, after 4.5 years at Meta, I did feel like, okay, I've kind of hit that plateau in terms of compensation. I hit that plateau in terms of my network expanding at Meta. And now what else is there to learn in terms of not just Android, but other skills? And, if you're getting to staff or senior staff levels at big tech, there is some forcing function to say, hey, you need to specialize very deeply in whatever you're doing. As I just felt like for where I was in my career, where I am right now, I want to be broader rather than just deeper. And so a combination of all three of those led me to just say, hey, let's bite the bullet and finally leave. I had been thinking about it for literally years, but I finally left in January 2022.
Yeah, and if I'm maybe I'll get the timeline a bit wrong, but obviously that's sort of the start of Taro, right? Get
Yeah.
into Y Combinator. Did you guys have that YC like before quitting the job, or did you guys just imagine like we got to run with it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And the answer is no, we didn't. So we actually applied for YC, got rejected. So the ideal, right? The ideal, which is what a lot of people want, is okay, I had this nice, cushy, big tech job. I get paid $500,000 a year or more, whatever it is. And then I apply for YC. I get funding. Funding is secured. I have this really good name brand now. YC is world famous. I'll immediately quit my job and transition immediately into YC, and then I'll have my $1 billion company. Never works out that way, right? And so that was our plan. It's like, hey, we're gonna do Meta, and then we applied for YC in the winter 2022 batch, right? So basically applying for that in October of 2021. We didn't get in, and that was actually very difficult. But at that point, I was already quite checked out. I was like, I need to leave because I'm not going to be productive at work. I'm basically let my team down. And so I ended up quitting anyway in January. And then we kind of floundered for like 2 or 3 months, just trying to find traction, trying to find what exactly we're trying to build. We chased our idea. And then we applied again to Y Combinator in, I guess, March of 2022. And we got in for the summer batch.
Okay, yeah, for sure. And I guess also you co-founded this with Alex, your co-founder. But what was the like founding story of like, you guys meeting and deciding that this is someone I can really build a company with? Because obviously that's a big decision to choose your co-founder.
Yeah, it's a huge decision. And I feel like a lot of people, so actually like maybe a fourth thing that I didn't mention about why I felt comfortable leaving Meta is because of Alex. Like because I had a co-founder who I actually had this relationship with for years that I trusted. And what I tell people often who are also thinking about starting a company is that if you are trying to go out and do co-founder dating or trying to find a co-founder, you're already kind of starting off badly. Like your co-founder should be someone presumably already in your network who you've met 3-4 years ago or a couple jobs ago. Like if you're trying to meet a co-founder today, I don't have that much faith that that relationship will last. And so I think that with Alex, like we were on the same team in 2017 when I first joined Meta. So that was like already the length of time was there. We also had a lot of similar interests in terms of YouTube and content creation. And we had built up this free community called Tech Career Grow, which was done while we were at our full-time jobs. And so we basically had like 5 years of data and 2 or 3 projects worth of data that, hey, this is something that we enjoy working with each other. We have somewhat complementary skill sets, and it's something that we want to, try it out. Like we're both at a time of our life where we could take that leap. Like none of us has kids. I actually ended up buying a house shortly after I left Facebook. But at the time, none of us had a mortgage. So like all those things were checked off that hey, now is the time. We have to do it now or never.
Yeah, for sure. I guess I do want to like link that because obviously I was thinking about the where you guys got the idea and sort of the origin story for Taro. I guess I'm assuming it was linked to this tech career growth community you guys had.
Yeah.
Could you guys maybe elaborate more, like how you guys knew for sure, okay, this is the problem that we're gonna like go all in on?
Yeah. So the backing up the tech career growth, the idea there was, hey, during COVID, there was a dramatic drop off in the amount of interaction or mentorship that happened within companies because like all of a sudden people went remote and engineers largely are pretty antisocial. At least I'll say for the people I interact with, right? It's like, if I don't have to talk to you, I'm not going to talk to you. And so because you lost a lot of that coffee conversation or lunchtime conversation, people just felt quite lost. And I think that we tapped into that. We had these like free info sessions and webinars that Alex and I ran, and we had like literally 800, 900 people showing up to these. And so we felt very fundamentally like, hey, people want this guidance and mentorship. But I think there is like another leap to be made on, hey, people want this. Are they willing to pay for it? Can you actually turn this into a business? And that's something that I think we didn't know at the time. So then once we left our jobs, we started talking to business. Like, the classic model here is that B2B is like where you get a lot more revenue, a lot more recurring, higher value revenue compared to like B2C is a slog in general for startups, right? And so our initial idea is, hey, can we build a B2B product where we can help engineers? But then we didn't have that much success there. And also we already had this community of like 15,000 people on tech career growth. And we also had pretty robust networks in terms of our personal lives. And we had this YouTube channel, LinkedIn presence. And so I just felt like, hey, there's so much more that we could do directly to help the people who already are in our community. And once we have that, we can always go from there to B2B, right? It's harder the other way around. But can we start with the PLG motion, product-led growth? Like start from the bottom. And then once you have a ton of people who trust you, then you can go out and sell to enterprise. And so that's what we ended up doing is like, hey, we have a lot of content. Can we basically package it up into some sort of membership program? And that's what Taro became.
Yeah, no, for sure. That completely makes sense when you talk me through the whole way. And actually, I wanted to ask you because, to be honest, I did first find you through like some of your YouTube videos, just random you talking about your career path or even like your degree at Stanford. I'm just, but when I look back, all your first few videos were literally just like Android tutorials, right? Like how to clone Instagram with Android and Firebase. What was the sort of like inspiration or even motivation for you to make videos in those early days?
Yeah. Okay. So this is like, I'm dating myself quite a bit, but there's a company or organization called CodePath, which is amazing. I actually took CodePath. What they do is they teach mobile development. And so that was my entry point into Android. Like Kosei, that company that we talked about when I first got out of Stanford, was like machine learning recommendation systems. And then my entry point from ML into mobile development was through CodePath. They offered like a completely free course that I took, and that was a really good way to build my network and build those skills. And after a while, I actually started teaching for CodePath. And the way you would teach on CodePath is they wanted instructors who would kind of do a walkthrough of an assignment. And I remember I had no idea what I was doing. Like I didn't even have a microphone, right? I had like some really horrible webcam. I like don't think I explained things really well. But I found that the thousands of people who were on CodePath, they actually got tons of value. And I would put them on YouTube as unlisted videos through CodePath. And people would comment like, wow, Rahul, thanks so much. It's like you saved my career. Or like, oh, I had like, this is not that hard. And I don't even think I did that good a job. And so then I thought, hey, if people are getting value from this, I can do way better compared to what I did earlier. And also I did some market research. And like, I went on YouTube, I looked at other people making Android content. And I was like, yeah, I can do better than these guys. I can probably speak more clearly. I can get a better microphone. I can explain things at a more deep level. And all that led me to say, hey, let me start doing that and see if I can just add value. And the other reason too is I didn't want to make it so personal. Like the content that you probably are more familiar with now is like, okay, here's my opinion about this tech topic. Here's my career. I didn't want to do that while I was fully employed at Facebook. So I thought, hey, if I can just do like Android explainers, no one can get upset with me about doing that. And so I did that for the first probably like year and a half or 2 years of my channel was just Android tutorials. And then finally, once I left, I started making more kind of personal content.
No, yeah, for sure. That makes sense. That definitely like throughout the time, just building up your skills. So when it comes time for, and the videos can link to Taro, like obviously super high quality, and the editing, the thumbnails, and like everything's already there. I am curious in terms of growth strategies that you guys use for Taro, because obviously like you guys have like YouTube videos, LinkedIn posts. I remember you mentioning SEO. I guess sort of how do you guys think about sort of like this type of growth, especially for what is more of a community, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's a great question. I'll say that, it is in flux. Like we're still experimenting and figuring out how to grow. Because I think with consumer in particular, there's so many channels you could explore. And it's a question of how do you prioritize them. So right now, the most effective channels are by far YouTube and LinkedIn. YouTube, just because we have some brand at this point, or my channel, to like build up trust and put out high quality advice. And that is very effective at, once you have trust, it's not that hard to say, hey, if you like this, there's a lot more like this over on this platform that I'm building called Taro. And so that's been effective. And LinkedIn is the go-to place for professional networking. Almost 1 billion people, I think, have accounts on LinkedIn. And so it's the LinkedIn algorithm can surface you to new people who can then find you out. And then I'd say those are the top two. Recently, we've been trying to do a lot more with referrals. And so like a big part of the community is, hey, if you get value from the community, then presumably you'll want to tell your friend or colleague about it. And so we have a referral program that has been pretty effective at getting that. We call it the K factor of like, what is your virality coefficient? That has been pretty effective. And then the final one, which honestly hasn't been going that well, is Google. Like ideally what you want is you want to have a ton of content like Quora or Reddit. We have a discussion forum on Taro. And we'd like all that content to be surfaced by Google when people are searching for like, how do I deal with a bad manager? Or how do I onboard into my company? Ideally, Taro should be like one of the top things that you see. So we've been trying to do more of that. Hasn't honestly been working that well, but I think it's like a long-term, you can't expect things to go viral on Google SEO in the way you can with YouTube, right? And so we're still trying to figure out the long-term strategy there.
No, yeah, for sure. And of course, I mean, you and Alex are both like technically like trained, technically experienced background. I'm curious in terms of, running a startup, raising money, trying to grow, trying to get users, trying to do all this stuff. What are some of the surprising stuff that you learned you didn't even maybe think about, or some stuff that you just had to get stuck in, like maybe even sales, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think there are two things that I think were surprising to me as an engineer who was starting the company. One, I think, is how do venture capitalists think? Because, we went through YC and that was a great experience. And then, typically what happens, you have demo day, which is like this 1-day period or 2-day period, I think, after YC, where you can basically pitch like 1,000 different investors. And so we got I forget, 50 or 60 inbound messages saying, hey, this is interesting. And so I thought, okay, this is a walk in the park. There should be no problem in just like raising money. It turns out 90% of the people either rejected us or ghosted us. And I think one of the things that was really, I was hit over the head with is like, you have to paint a very, very compelling story on how you become big. Because that's really what VCs care about. Because if you I think our mentality as engineers, somewhat conservatively, is like, hey, we already have a product. We're actually on a path to profitability already, even back then. We're charging a good amount of money and people are paying for it. Like they're paying for it either out of pocket or through their learning budget at work. And so we have a very clear path to getting to 1 million, 2 million in revenue. And what they care about is, hey, I don't really care about getting to 1 million in revenue. I want you to get to 100 million or 1 billion in revenue, right? And so I think that unless you have a very clear, believable story about how you go from where you are, like 100K at the time, to 100 million in revenue, it's not that interesting and you'll just get rejected quite a bit. So that was one thing. The other thing is what you said, sales. I think that the hardest part, honestly, is like, how do you even get your foot in the door? Like, because I think we have a pretty good network of engineers, but oftentimes the buyer and the user of software at an enterprise level are different people, right? So the user, we're trying to build software for the senior engineer at Google to get better at their job, or the senior engineer at, Airbnb, whatever it is. But the person who makes the decision to buy that software from Taro is probably some man or woman in the learning department or the HR department. And the way they think is very, very different from how me or you probably think. And so just like trying to figure out how to de-risk it for them and tell them this is not like gonna, there's so many hoops to jump through and like so many things you have to convince them of before they even are willing to talk to you. So that was actually quite painful. It still is painful, honestly. So we're still trying to figure that out.
No, yeah, that's completely fair. Damn, what you mentioned about the VCs is definitely a very interesting. Like as you mentioned, like on the surface seems, go through Y Combinator, oh, it's set, confirm can raise funds. But as you mentioned, in reality, it actually is a lot tougher, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
I'm sort of curious throughout, like obviously, the numerous places you worked at, the different experience you have, and it doesn't have to necessarily be professional, but this podcast is the 1.01 podcast because I love this idea of habits over a long time. What do you think maybe are some of the key habits that you've developed that are still maintaining that have brought you like the highest value?
Yeah. Okay. I think that the first thing that comes to mind for me is this idea of quantity over quality. I think that so many people I talk to, whether it's for building a side project or for, even in their professional day job or for making a YouTube channel, for example, they just get stuck on, I need to make sure that it's really high quality. I need to meet my standard of excellence before I can put it out in the world. But I think that ends up causing more harm than good because what my experience has been is that the more videos you put out on YouTube, the better you will naturally get. The more blog posts you write, the better your blog will become. The more code you write, the better coder you become. And so I feel like what I tell people is instead of aiming for 10 out of 10 content when you like making a video or building an app, for example, aim for it to be like a 6 out of 10. Like tell yourself that I will ship this once I hit the 6 out of 10 threshold. And if you do that, you could ship way more. And through the process of shipping way more, whether it's videos or blog posts or code, you'll become way, way better. And I think that's something that I think I did pretty well. Just like I put out videos, no matter, I was on that treadmill. Every week for the first 2 years, I put out a video. And I think that really did help me build up an audience and just get better at making videos.
Okay, no, I definitely love that. It's definitely something you've mentioned before, is the idea of like just putting something out and iterating on it because just by getting it out there is already half the battle.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, obviously, like, considering the amount of content you've put out, amount of advice you've given out, I'm just maybe what are some of the nicest or like most memorable sort of inbound you've got from people who've just like gotten value from your advice or videos?
Oh yeah, I mean that's like why I love the jobs. It's like there's so much. That's the other thing about honestly, like just linking it back to something that you had asked about earlier too. One of the reasons why we actually wanted so deeply to do B2C instead of B2B, which is like what most startups are advised to do, is that you get that direct impact, which is so intoxicating. Like I'll give you an example. Like literally 2 days ago, someone sent me a WhatsApp audio message, which is already kind of unique. I was, I don't get these audio messages. And basically, it was like a 1 minute monologue of him saying, I got a job at Google and I talked to the recruiter and they're super excited. I'm really excited. And this would not have been possible without you or Taro. And I was like, wow, like that's the kind of stuff that it's so magical to be able to, see that there's a pretty direct impact on people. So that's kind of somewhat rare and like very uh, you know, like life changing for them and also for me, frankly. But also, I think the beauty of the internet today is that you get feedback from so many people all the time, good and bad, frankly. So, like on YouTube, I get a comment every day. On the blog or on LinkedIn, you get messages every day, and so I would say 80% of them are really friendly and nice, and these all always like are gratifying for me to hear. And then you get some negative, but that comes with the territory.
No, yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's the beauty of the internet. It's like everything is just instant feedback
Yeah.
and come with everything. Just to wrap things up, I'm curious, where do you think Taro in 1 year's time, how, like, what are maybe some like key differences, or so where do you want to see it at?
Yeah. Okay. So the way I think about Taro is that I want Taro to be kind of like the Amazon Prime of career growth in the sense that, like, I think most people think about Amazon Prime as like you get so much value once you're part of that program. You get, whatever, like 2 day shipping or 1 day shipping, and you get Amazon Prime Video, you get, discounts, you get all this, like, so much stuff. And I want that to be true for Taro, where like, I want myself and the company to provide so much value to you that you would be stupid not to have a membership in Taro because you get so much good advice, so much good mentorship, so many discounts on partner products that you can actually start using today in a credible way. That's what I want in 1 year. And I think that, we have, we need to kind of create this flywheel of more content, more people, more community. I think we can get there though in a year. And I think longer term, even beyond that, I want the same thing to be replicated for every other job function. You're a consultant, you're a doctor, you're a banker, right? There's probably a lot of tribal knowledge in each of those domains. I want Taro to be that place where people really come together and help each other and get tons of value just by joining that community.
No, it sounds like a great mission, and I'm definitely happy to be a part of the community and maybe along the way get myself value from that as well.
Yeah.
No, but for sure. As I mentioned again, thank you so much for the time to speak to me today, Rahul.
Yeah, it was super fun. Thanks for having me, Wilson.